All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as we talk about some of the biggest overreactions from week number 2 in the Niners' loss in Minneapolis. And, of course, we are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go get some brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon. Go say hi to Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And this video is also sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. And use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. I won $90 at the end of the preseason. I came one player away from 8 yards away from winning in week 1. So download the app below and make sure you use the promo code Niners, Niners, to get your first deposit matched up to $200. And once again, thanks to Better for being the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, let's talk a little bit about the overreactions. I've got 5 overreactions connected to the 49ers, and then we will go with 5 overreactions from around the NFL. And let's start with the 49ers. I think the first overreaction from the loss to the Vikings is one that I've heard a lot of. Brock Purdy's regressing. He's the reason that he was sacked 6 times. No, he's not. He was not the reason that he was sacked 6 times. He was, is he perfect? No. Did he have a difficult day at the office? I would say yes. I think in a lot of ways, Kyle Shanahan indicated today how difficult it is to play quarterback in the NFL and against a team like Minnesota. Because one, they blitz you a lot. They're blitzing 80% of the time. They're dropping zone. They're dropping into a soft zone. So at the snap of the ball, you have to quickly evaluate on every snap. Are they sending 3 and dropping 8? Are they sending 4 and dropping 7? Are they bringing an extra blitzer that you need to account for? Are they bringing 2? Are they? Is it a 5-man pressure? Is it a 6-man pressure? Do you have to, if it's a 6-man pressure, you got to find out who the hot receiver is and make sure you've got the hot route in your sights like right away. And then that's what they do a lot of the time is they blitz. But then a lot of times they drop into zones. And there were many times in week 2 where the Vikings rushed 3 and dropped 8. Where they rushed 4 and dropped 7. And then the job of the quarterback is to be patient, go through his progressions, and get the ball out on time to wherever the soft spot in the zone tells you need to go with the ball. So you have 2 distinctly different game plans if you're the quarterback. If they're sending a 6-man pressure or 5-man pressure, you got to find out where the hot route is and how to get the ball out and get it out with accuracy on time. And that's when they're blitzing you. And when they're dropping, rushing 3 and dropping 8, and they're rushing 4 and they're dropping 7, and they're playing a zone behind it, you've got to dial down your tendency to want to be aggressive and start hunting for soft spots in the zone. Start throwing with anticipation. And it's 2 separate mindsets. So I don't know. The people who were saying Brock's regressing, he's 18-5 in 23 starts. 18-5. I mean, that's a pretty gaudy record right there. 18-5 is a great record. So that's what his record is. So Brock Purdy's is done pretty good. And 18-5 means he's a pretty decent quarterback. And he's playing at a pretty high level right now. So, did he make all the right calls? Did he make all the right plays? Did he make mistakes in this game? Yeah, he made mistakes. But he's also, what yesterday represented was the 6th 300-yard day of his career. And to put that in perspective, he's only the 6th quarterback in the history of the NFL to have a passer rating over 100 or more in 15 of his first 25 career starts. There's only 2 quarterbacks, Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer, and Patrick Mahomes, future Hall of Famer, who have had more 100 or higher passer ratings in their first 25 starts. So Brock's had 15, Warner's had 16, Mahomes has had 18. So, to say you're third in history as far as the first 25 career starts, you've had a quarterback rating of 100 or higher in 15 of those 25 career starts. So basically, he's playing the position at a really, really high level. So this idea that he's regressing and that he's the reason that he threw all those 6 picks, I don't know what to say to you if you really believe that. I went through each pick one by one. The first pick, Van Ginkel tackled him for a loss. He was trying to get back to the line of scrimmage on 2nd and 10. The second one, it was he pump faked the defender Greenard on a 1st and 10 play and got back to the line of scrimmage. It was a -0-yard sack. So those two almost weren't sacks. Those were just like runs that he didn't get quite back to the line, and it registered as a sack. So, I mean, even though it said he was sacked 6 times, in reality, it was probably more like 4. Sack number 3, Pat Jones Jr. bull rushed Trent Williams right into the lap of Brock Purdy. And Purdy had Debo on the comeback route, but Van Ginkel on the stunt crossed Purdy's face right at the time he wanted to go to Debo. So Jones got the sack. So that, to me, was on Trent. If you said to me, who was that call on, or who was that sack on, I thought number 3 was on Trent. Number 4, Minnesota blitz. They came with a 5-man pressure. Purdy looked right, but Pat Jones was coming untouched for a sack. And Trent Williams blocked the inside rusher and let Jones run free, and Jones had a free runner at the quarterback. So I don't think that was Brock Purdy's fault. It may not have been Trent Williams' fault. And then on the sack 5 was the 2nd and 9 from the 39. Purdy was in the shotgun. Minnesota came with a TE stunt, and Trent whiffed on Cashman, the linebacker, who ricocheted off of Trent into Purdy for the sack. So, I mean, Banks blocked one guy. Trent's got to block the other guy, and instead he didn't block anybody. He didn't block Cashman. He was trying to set up Dallas Turner for an easy sack, but instead ricocheted off of Trent right into Purdy, and he sacked Purdy. That was on Trent. That was sack number 5. And then sack number 6, Purdy was looking for Jawan Jennings. He was covered, and then he faked, and the ball came out of his hand, and it was viewed as a sack fumble that went to Jihad Ward. That one was on Purdy. But I'm just saying, all 6 of those were not on Brock Purdy. So this idea that he's somehow regressing, that he's the reason that he was sacked 6 times, that's not accurate. All right, overreaction number 2. Kyle Shanahan can't call a game without a lead. There is some evidence that Kyle calls a different game with a lead than he does without a lead. I think he tends to press. I think he is a tad impatient. He tries to get it back all at once. It's kind of like sitting there at a blackjack table and you lose a few hands, and then you just start upping your bet. Well, you know what? That might not be the best way to go, because you're showing a lack of patience and you're trying to get it back all at once. So, first of all, Kyle Shanahan, if you fired him tomorrow, would be hired immediately and given millions and millions of dollars. So this idea that he can't call a game with a lead, I don't think that's accurate, but I think his game calling changes when he's ahead as opposed to behind. And I think he's more patient when he's ahead and a whole lot less patient when he falls behind. So I think that one might be not necessarily an overreaction. It might be actually somewhat fair. All right, here's an overreaction. The Niners' offensive line's a mess. Pooney was in his 2nd game. Trent Williams held out all summer. Banks played well. Brendel was the lowest graded player on that offensive line, the center. And you may see Feliciano at center before long, or Nugent or Zakel. I get the feeling Brendel, the rope might be short there. But the Niners, the week before, opened holes for Jordan Mason where he had 94 yards before contact. That was 2nd best in the league. So the Niners offensive line is not a mess. I think the Niners offensive line is a work in progress that's getting better every week. And I think it's a better run blocking line than a pass blocking line, but I think it's an overreaction to say, oh, the line's a joke. The line's a mess. I don't agree. Overreaction number 4. Niner wide receivers can't get separation. This might not be an overreaction. This might actually be true. 49er receivers are getting the least separation of any group of wide receivers in pro football. I don't think that's in any way an overreaction. I think that's what it is. So if you're saying the Niners wide receivers can't get separation, you're not overreacting. You're reacting. And you're probably right on. And then overreaction number 4, is it an overreaction or not? Nick Sorensen is Steve Wilks 2.0. I think that Sorensen is going to be far better than Wilks. I think Sorensen's fronts and rushes and rush plan is going to more consistently match up with the coverage plan on the back end. And for that reason, I think Sorensen will be an upgrade on Wilks. But in this game, there wasn't enough pressure on the quarterback. There wasn't tight enough coverage underneath. They just didn't. It didn't look. It looked very similar to what Wilks and the Niner defense produced last year. So I understand the people saying, he's just Steve Wilks, just a different looking guy. He's just a new, improved version of Steve Wilks. I would say Sorensen is going to be better than Wilks, but at least 2 weeks in, he's got one good game and one bad game. So it's hard to say. Now, as far as overreactions around the NFL, let's go through some of those. Here's 5 that I can think of that I think are overreactions, 5 or 6. The Saints are 2-0, and people are saying today, the Saints are the best team in the NFC. No, they're not. The NFC's 2-0 teams are Minnesota, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Seattle. The Saints have scored on 16 of their 21 offensive drives, and they've scored touchdowns on 11 of the 21 offensive drives. And they do have the ex-Niner coach, Clint Kubiak, as their offensive coordinator, and he's brought the use of more shifting and more motion as he brings Shanahan's offense to the Big Easy. And they clearly neutralized Micah Parsons, and they had a great start. But you know what? Carolina is who they destroyed in week 1. Carolina's atrocious. Dallas is a team that is 2 teams. If Dallas gets a big lead on you, they are incredible, and they can put a ferocious rush on you, pick off passes, and they can turn a 20-point lead into a 40-point lead, probably better than almost any team in pro football. But they're a bully, and if you stand up to them and you don't let them bully you, you beat them, and that's what the Niners have done. That's what the Saints just did. So, are the Saints the best team in the NFC? No. Are they better than Carolina? Yeah. Did they get a lead on Dallas? Yeah. But they're not the best team in the NFC. I would go with the Niners. I would go with Detroit. I would go with Philadelphia. I'd go with Green Bay. I'd go with all those teams before I'd go with the Saints. All right, Bryce Young is a bust. This is the Carolina Panthers quarterback who was the number 1 pick in last year's draft. They got a brand new head coach there in Dave Canales, and they benched Bryce Young. He's completed 55% of his passes, no touchdowns, 3 picks. He was 5 for 15 on throws that went over 10 yards downfield. So he's just got no downfield passing attack to save his life. They've been outscored by 60 points in the first 2 games. They've scored 13 points in 2 games offensively, and they've allowed 73. So Carolina was the NFL's worst record in the league last year. They lost Derek Brown, their star defensive tackle, to a knee injury right off the start of the year. And I just think that Bryce Young, I mean, it's always too young to call any of these quarterbacks like career busts, because look at Sam Darnold. He's 27. He was a bust with the Jets. He was a bust with the Panthers. He was a backup with the Niners, and now he's 2-0 with the Vikings. So guys improve, and Bryce Young's going to improve. But they're going to regret that for the next 20 years, because he's never going to be C.J. Stroud. And this talk that he was the modern-day Aaron Rodgers is 6'2", 220. This guy's 5'10", 205. He's not Aaron Rodgers, okay? And they don't have a lot of weapons, so right now it's all falling on him. But they don't have a lot of weapons. Jonathan Mingo, and they're trying to add some weapons, but they really don't have much. So I would say currently Bryce Young is a bust. But is he going to be a bust long term? I think that's premature. All right, overreaction number 3. Sam Darnold's going to lead the Minnesota Vikings to the playoffs. He's 2-0, and he did complete 72% of his passes with 4 touchdowns and 2 picks in the first 2 games. And he's going to be the guy all year, right? J.J. McCarthy got hurt in the preseason. They put Sam Darnold in there, and they're going with Sam Darnold the whole way. But if you look at Minnesota's schedule, it gets tough, man. It really does. They play Houston. They play at Lambeau. They've got the Jets in London. Then they've got the Lions. I mean, they got 4 or 5 really tough games coming up. So I'm going to say that Sam Darnold will not lead the Vikings to the playoffs. They're off to a hot start, but it's just that, a hot start. I think they'll come back crashing back down to earth. I think Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay will all beat them at different points during this year in the division. And then they play some tough games outside the division. So big win. They're 2-0. They're looking good. But they're starting to thin out. You know, Addison's hurt. Now Jefferson's hurt. You know, they don't have great depth. And I just think that they're a team that 5 weeks from now, we're going to say that team started 2-0. Remember how hot they were out of the chute? So I think that's an overreaction to say that Darnold's leading the Vikings to the playoffs. All right, here's an overreaction. Will the Dolphins trade for Russell Wilson? I think they should. He's 35. He's got a calf injury. Pittsburgh, though, is 2-0 with Justin Fields at quarterback instead of Russell. The Steelers did give Russell a no-trade clause, but if they're trying to get him out of there to start somewhere, I think he'd probably be open to it, especially in Miami. You know, Pittsburgh started 2-0 with Fields, and they've got road wins over Atlanta and Denver to start the year. But now Tua Tagovailoa has gone down with a concussion. Miami only has Skylar Thompson as the backup. He's a very young, inexperienced, and probably not a future NFL starter. He's probably a career backup. So I think this makes sense for the Dolphins. And maybe if it's not Russell Wilson, maybe it's Jeff Wilson to the Niners for Josh Dobbs. But I think the Dolphins trading for a quarterback is likely. I don't think that's an overreaction. I think Tua has got his 3rd or 4th concussion, and I don't know that he reads coverage. I don't know that he's the guy long-term there. In fact, if you said, is he or isn't he, I'd say he isn't. So there you go. And Fields has looked good for Pittsburgh. He's completing 70% of his passes. They're 2-0. I think they probably would rather go with Fields than Russell Wilson, especially since Wilson's kind of a risk at this point based on what he did in Denver. All right. And then overreaction number 3. And there's always, the good teams that get off to a start or a cold start. Like, people are asking, is Cincinnati, Kansas City's, the number 1 threat to Kansas City? Burrow has proven that he can beat Mahomes. He's 3-3 against Kansas City with the Bengals. But T. Higgins has got the hamstring, and Jamar Chase has got this contract thing. And I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball all year. And Cincinnati is off to a slow start. One of these years, they're not going to be able to lift themselves up. I would say they might, on paper, look like the number 1 threat to Kansas City, but I still think the Niners are the number 1 threat to Kansas City. And overreaction number 2 is there's always people who overreact to the team that gets off to the 2-0 start or the team that gets off to the 0-2 start. The Baltimore Ravens are now 0-2, and they blew a 10-point lead to the Raiders on Sunday. They got 3 new starters on the offensive line. They lost their defensive coordinator who went to Seattle to be the head coach there. And, they're going with some kind of unproven guys, on their coaching staff, which is kind of unlike John Harbaugh. So are the Ravens going to be able to get back up? Well, I would have thought that they would have just taken the Raiders apart, but they haven't taken the Raiders apart. And the Raiders, they didn't take the Raiders apart, and the Raiders got the win. So Eric DeCosta is a great GM. John Harbaugh is a great head coach. Todd Monken is their offensive coordinator. Zach Orr is the DC. I don't know. I mean, they got 3 new starters on the offensive line. We'll see. They lost, a running back in the offseason, but they brought in Derrick Henry. Can Henry be the guy at his age? Can he be he's 30 years of age, but he's been, He's been used an awful lot. And then defensively, they have Matabuke, but they lost Patrick Queen to the Steelers in free agency. They got some new guys. Kyle Hamilton's very, very special in the back end, but Nate Wiggins is already hurt early on. I just think the Ravens, when you look at the Ravens and you look at the schedule that they have coming up, next is Dallas. Then there's Buffalo. Then there's Cincinnati. And they're 0-2. And there's a chance that they lose all three of those games. So I would say the Ravens are in trouble. I think they're in trouble. When you're blowing a 10-point fourth quarter lead at home to the Las Vegas Raiders, and you have three new starters on your offensive line and a brand new DC, and you're staring at 0-2, and here comes Dallas and Buffalo and Cincinnati, I would say there's no chance they're going to run the table there. I would say they're probably going to be, 1-3 after 4 games. Maybe 1-4 after 5 games. We'll see. But I would say the Ravens are in trouble. Just the fact that they have such a tough schedule and there is so much uncertainty on both sides of the ball, on their O-line, on their defense. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions there. So I would say if you're one of these people, the sky is falling on the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, I'm with you. I don't think that's an overreaction. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. And, of course, this video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of The Krug Show. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.